For Pacifica Radio, I'm Scott Baba. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas officials, accusing them of war crimes and crimes against humanity over the war in Gaza and the October attacks that triggered Israel's offensive in the Palestinian territory. The decision turns Netanyahu and the others into internationally wanted suspects and is likely to further isolate them and complicate efforts to negotiate a ceasefire to end the 13-month conflict. Netanyahu condemned the arrest warrant against him, saying Israel, quote, rejects with disgust the absurd and false actions. Meanwhile, Hamas welcomed the decision by the International Criminal Court to issue warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, calling it a, quote, important and historic precedent after what it said was decades of injustice at the hands of fascist occupation. Hamas's statement did not refer to the warrants issued for the militant group's own leaders. Ukraine has claimed that Russia launched an intercontinental ballistic missile overnight at a city. If confirmed, it would be the first time Moscow has used such a weapon in the war. Ukraine did not provide any evidence that an ICBM was used in the attack on the central city of Dnipro, apparently armed with conventional warheads. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said a missile used in the strike, quote, matches the speed and altitude of an ICBM. The Kremlin refused to comment. The attack comes in a week when tensions have repeatedly soared, as the U.S. eased restrictions on Ukraine's use of American-made long-range missiles inside Russia, and the Kremlin lowered its thresholds for launching nuclear weapons. One of Asia's richest men, controversial Indian tycoon Gautam Adani, is again in the spotlight. His company's stock plunged up to 20% today after he was indicted by U.S. prosecutors on charges he duped investors in a massive solar energy project in India by concealing that it was being facilitated by an alleged bribery scheme. Rebecca Bunden reports.
U.S. authorities say that Adani and other executives promised more than $250 million in bribes to Indian government officials to secure solar energy contracts. Federal prosecutors accused them of hiding and using the scheme to raise money from investors in the U.S. The Adani Group has interests in sectors including ports, airports and energy. The group last year faced a crisis after a U.S. short seller accused it of stock manipulation and accounting fraud, accusations which Adani denied. Rebecca Bunden, Mumbai.
Texas is offering a parcel of rural ranch land along the U.S.-Mexico border to use as a staging area for potential mass deportations under President-elect Donald Trump. The property is located in rural Starr County in the Rio Grande Valley. Republican Texas Land Commissioner Don Buckingham sent a letter to Trump last week extending the offer. The Trump transition team did not immediately return a request for comment. Sally Patterson reports.
Donald Trump ran for president on a platform of tackling illegal immigration. Now he's working on turning those promises into action. Firstly, by using the U.S. military to help with his proposed mass deportations. Now, Texas authorities say facilities can be built on their land to process, detain and deport undocumented migrants. There are around 11.4 million immigrants living in the country illegally, according to the Migration Policy Institute. Many now face an uncertain future as the next president prepares for his second term in office. Sally Patterson, New York.
Just a few weeks ago, the path ahead for the Federal Reserve looked straightforward. With inflation cooling and the job market slowing, the Fed appeared on track to steadily cut interest rates. In September, its officials predicted that they would reduce their benchmark rate 4 times next year, on top of 3 rate cuts this year. Yet that outlook has swiftly changed. Several surprisingly strong economic reports, combined with President-elect Donald Trump's policy proposals, have led to a decidedly more cautious tone from the Fed that could mean fewer cuts and higher interest rates than had been expected. Fewer rate cuts would likely mean continued high mortgage rates and other borrowing costs for consumers and businesses. Auto loans would remain expensive. Small businesses would still face high loan rates. In a speech last week in Dallas, Chair Jerome Powell made clear that the Fed isn't necessarily inclined to cut rates each time it meets every 6 weeks. His comments were widely seen as signaling potentially fewer rate cuts in 2025. a view that sent stock prices falling after they had surged with Trump's election. I'm Scott Baba for Pacifica Radio.